Oh, all right. Well, good morning. This is Chad Broshears, Chad Everett Broshears. I'm the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia, and I say finally. I think this is actually a good point for the topic, and that is how many attempts it took to actually get YouTube to go live for me. So, all right, today is thought thinking character development. So let's get right into it. So with that, I liken thinking a lot to exercise. Uh, as far as like most people know, if you want to change the shape of your body, you have to do certain things to do it. Like you have to exercise, whatever that exercise might be. It doesn't have to be going to the gym, but going to the gym would be an easy example. So we'll stick to that for now. So if you want to really change your body or to get it to adapt to something that's more advantageous for your goals, by the way, I don't come. My mindset when it comes to exercise is simple. I do exercise to adapt to a goal. So if I want to become a mountain climber, I'm going to exercise that would make me most capable, most agile, most functional for mountain climbing. If I want my body to change to a certain direction, I'm going to exercise in a manner that's going to help me change my body to that. If it's for aesthetic values, then it's to condition for that, right? If I want my body to look a certain way solely for the purpose of looking a certain way, I'm going to exercise that way. But it's not alone. There's other variables. It's not just go lift weights, mindlessly moving from one place to another and expecting, some sort of, body change behavior. I may become more functional for my environment that I'm training for, but there's going to be other aspects that I need to take in consideration. Like I need to eat a certain way, be in bed by a certain time to get the rest and recovery. There's a lot to it. I've got a pretty extensive background in physiology, so spent a bit of time there. Fascinating field, and it's given root to other things in my life. So I'll start. Continue with that same analogy. We'll consider that if you want, for guys that want big bulging biceps, right? If you work out with the same weight, consistently for a certain period of time, it's going to reduce that big bulging bicep, the potential for it. So if it's a 35-pound weight and they just keep curling that, there'll become a point in time whenever they will reach the maximum of that muscle size. It's not going to continue to grow. Your body gets more calorie proficient. It requires fewer calories to do the same action. It's an efficiency-based machine. So whenever you continue to exercise in that same way, before you know it, your body has hit a plateau. Now, you're not going to continue to get better in that direction. Not in the sense of body change, in this, aesthetics to performance. Your performance may go up a bit because it's continuing to adapt to a 35-pound weight. But if you're doing it for 50 reps, you're not going to get a big bulging bicep as much as you're more likely to get a leaner muscle that looks smaller by comparison than when you first got your first swell or your initial swell from the exercise. So keep doing the same thing time and time again, expecting a different result, falls into Einstein's position on, or his definition for insanity. So when it comes to likening that to thinking, so first comes a thought. Now, my earlier stages before I got into becoming, trained in psychology, I've always had a way of looking at the world through a psychological perspective that gained a lot of encouragement from my peers to elaborate on what they're going through and all of that. So that's why I call my fluency in the subject. So when it comes to the term that I used, I came up with what I called occupation, or what is that? Now I've got neuroplasticity, mental occupation. As we've all seen children play, they will come up with an idea and they'll live into that for a bit. So that idea they're going to expand on, they're going to continue to develop it until it actually starts adding to them. So a child at any minute can be two different professions because they don't really have a whole lot of world experience, but they want to play and they're pretending. Well, we still do those things, right? We do those in our own mind. We'll imagine, fantasize, whatever it might be, like something else, right? Pressure from work, and you fantasize about starting your own company or leaving to work for somebody else or whatever. That's in the thought phase. It's not really doing much. It's just like, hey, it's there and it might be gone the next second, just like a child. Their thoughts are gone. They've played it out. It's an engineer. I can't tell you how many times, I was a paleontologist and something else, as like a 6-year-old playing, outside or whatever. Can't tell you how many times I also forced my brother into playing dinosaurs with me. We were dinosaurs. So, it's like we have these imaginations that take us where they take us. But those are in the thought phases, right? Some thinking goes into it, but usually it's left. It's a superficial level. It doesn't really go very far until something does take root. And that thought that takes root and we start giving it more life, we're thinking more about, like, we start weighing these thoughts against our world experiences, right? So if it's the job experience where you're like, hey, I want to get out of this job, you got into the job first. When did the romance die? Right? Whether that job you got into was just to pay the bills and you finally caught up, or your threshold for what you won't tolerate and your need to get to, let's say up here, you need to pay your bills because the struggle of not having money and not being able to get food or to have an easier life, you may have that level of stress up here, and what you will tolerate is down here, but you're willing to move it to meet with that need to pay your bills. Once you've satisfied that need, you may not, you may start looking for some other opportunity, because, hey, I'm not going to tolerate these things anymore. I've superseded my stress levels on paying my bills. I'm satisfied there now, but this nonsense or nuisance of this other stressor is getting me. So therefore I'm going to move away from it. So the fantasies start kicking in. First it's a thought, then it goes into the thinking model. And as it's in that thinking model, you're giving it more life. The more you put effort into it, the more likely you are to go towards that. Right? You'll facilitate as much as you can possibly predict into the thought. So you're weighing that against your life experiences, what you know about it. If it's another job, what you've actually gathered so far, you may go into the research phase to find out what it takes to get the job. That's more proactive and it's more developmental. You may get into asking questions inside of the research model. It could be surveying by asking people questions in your life, people that that do the job, people that have known somebody who does it, things like that. Pick up a book, read articles, watch videos. There's all kinds of things that are in the research model, but that's in the thinking process. The more you add credence to it, the more effort, the more genuine you are towards going towards it. Excuse me. The more likely you are to start developing some character traits for it. Now, being a hiring manager for some time, I would look for character traits that would be most advantageous for the position I'm trying to fill. So it wasn't, hey, I'm desperate to hire. I was looking for the traits that would be more beneficial for the position, both for the employee and for the company. So it wasn't just put shoes in the seat, right? Or put, feet in the shoes, butts in the seats kind of thing. It was more of, how do we make this the most impactful direction for the people involved? And that's what I was doing versus just trying to get people loaded in. So I wanted to get more proficiency on both sides. So this is what we do whenever it comes to that, to the thought, thinking, and character development. I look for the character development. So I liken thinking and thoughts to exercise because we get thoughts all the time, but that doesn't mean that the thought actually is going somewhere. They flow through our minds because our minds don't like to sit idle. Our brains are very sophisticated functioning organs in the body that have the greatest capacity for prediction. We pick up all kinds of things, all kinds of little nuances that tell us something's going on. It's how we navigate our reality. So it doesn't like to sit idle. But you'll have thoughts that leave, and you can't easily reclaim them because they had really little to no value for you. Then there's other thoughts that do have more value. And as you sit on that thought, you allow it to expand into thinking. You're measuring it against other things that you've experienced in your life and what you'd like to experience. So that thinking starts to, the more that holds in your thought process, the more you'll start shifting your behavior to accommodate for that to become part of your character. A light or superficial aspect of your character doesn't have a lot of depth, because once it's hit by the first stressor that comes along, then you might abandon that thing that you were working towards. You've let go of that character aspect because it didn't have enough root yet. It can happen because your desires at a certain level, and we'll say your desires right here in the video, right? And the stressor that you're unfamiliar with has a level up here where you may not actually be able to pay your bills, or you may have relationship issues or whatever for pursuing it. Once that stressor pops up and it hits you, it may completely take you out of that character development piece, because you don't have enough safety in that character, enough in that development. You don't have enough safety there to push you into, continuing. And it may be enough of an emotional experience where you're disappointed enough, you're hurt in some way, you don't even pursue it again, because you tell yourself, I can't pursue this again because it's dangerous. It's safer to stay over in the other place. Now, a little bit about my background in this is I've left 2 careers making over 6 figures. I've had multiple different jobs. The reason why that's beneficial is I left those because the first one I was working for the power company, following in my father's footsteps that my older brother also pursued. And I followed suit because it was a family inheritance concept, if you will. And I just got to a certain point that I was already well financially taken care of. I just wasn't happy with the job, as I was doing something somebody else put in front of me. It's what my family could easily teach me at the dinner table. It was an easy place to be able to teach me. It was something that can be brought back to the home, and the conversation can continue of a level of expertise, and it's passing it down. So my older brother followed suit, still in the business, as a supervisor in the field. But I just got to a point where I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, and I didn't want to resent things that I did in my life. So therefore I had to leave it. So I started thinking about what else I wanted to do. So I went from working for the power industry, and I shifted over to a commission-only position, working as a personal trainer for a company that is a more revolutionary type personal training company that was placed inside of a physical therapy office with a holistic education from a very high-end mentor in the field. So it was a kind of a scary transition. Didn't have a safety net really, other than just some of my savings that I had put together, but I didn't have anyone else to drop back on to help, move forward. So I was in the thought process for a bit when I realized I was unhappy. I got into the thinking model whenever I was introduced to opportunities, and it wasn't the full-blown character development yet. I was just thinking about other options, what else I could be doing, just fantasizing about it. And then I was introduced to this gentleman who owned the company, by way, interestingly enough, was just working on putting together a charity, and he had already successfully done it. So a mutual friend introduced us, and this gentleman offered me a position with him, but I had an initial investment. There was a lot of things that I had to look into. It wasn't like I could just jump into this job. So I had to really put some thought into it and the thinking into it, because I had to put skin in the game, which was putting money towards it, putting time towards it, and losing the security of being a W-2 employee or working for a corporation and becoming a self-provider. So that was, a 1099. It was a little scary to shift over, but I had enough character. I started putting enough character development in and realized that even if the money wasn't going to be a heavy move, I was going to be able to survive and go through what I now call tuition, which is the stress that comes with change. That's what I call, stress through change is tuition for what you're becoming, just like paying tuition to go to college. So I learned a lot about the body on an accelerated path once I left the company, the power industry, and worked for this gentleman as a 1099 employee. Working in a physical therapy office, we learned a lot of corrective exercise, which is one of the things that I became an expert in my own senses. Corrective exercise specialty, what is it that you can do to help balance the body? So one of the reasons why I have such an affinity about using exercise as a method for mental change as well, or likening it to it, because it's easier for people to recognize. You can see it much faster than, understanding how thoughts work. So, or thinking works. So I changed my behavior to become first a functional trainer before I became a corrective exercise specialist. So with that, it was developing myself and the character necessary to be a functional trainer, because I wasn't ready to be, more of a corrective exercise specialty. But it was a necessary building block. It was part of the character. So I had to occupy the thoughts constantly. And before I realized it, my day was consumed with thinking about that type of behavior, about being that person. So one of the things that I used to help the process was, up until that point, did not read often. I considered reading a magazine a success. Reading through a muscle magazine or something, as that was, I was successful because I accomplished reading through it. And then once I was introduced to this mentor, I had decided that I was going to read for a minimum of 30 minutes a day in the subject necessary to be, successful in training. So it took me about a week before I bumped it up to an hour. And then it was less than a month after starting that I had already made a declaration that I wasn't going to listen to music and for any just basic entertainment values, just to let my mind drift off or whatever. I was going to listen to podcasts, or I was going to listen to something educational for my position. I wasn't going to watch television unless it had information value for what I was developing. And then it was less than 2 months that I had come up with nothing before 4 o'clock that just has entertainment service. It had to be educational. So I went from 30 minutes to parameters around that helped me grow my thinking model into character development. So past the thought, past the thinking, now into character. So, and it was extremely successful for me because I became entertained by the education. So something I was craving more than just looking to learn a few more things. So it did develop me into becoming a very proficient, very effective trainer. But I also got away from the idea of just being a bodybuilder, build my body, because I wanted something more functional. After studying bodybuilding, to realize that a good deal of those individuals they have degrees of disability after they've finished their bodybuilding campaign and they've left the business, whether that's a physical handicap or disability or mental, emotional, or something of that nature, because of what the industry does to you. So not all of them, but there's a good deal of them that actually have those kind of challenges. So now when it comes to the exercise model and the thinking, if you keep thinking the same way, you're not going to have a whole lot of value that goes into your character if you don't continue to get into your leave your comfort zone. So if you want to really develop that character, you have to get out of your comfort zone in order to move forward. If you consider the people you keep in your life that push you back into old thinking models, and the way they do that is reminding you of things that you've brought up before. You try to do something different and they kind of give you pushback or ridicule over it. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I won't get into that at this moment, why other people do that. But they keep pushing back those old thoughts. Also, you have a desire to want those old thoughts because it's a way of keeping yourself familiar with that person, especially when your stresses are high and you need companionship to some degree to feel like you're not alone. It kind of makes you want to go back to those old conversations where you feel really fluent, you feel comfortable, you feel like you're home. So those things do come up. They're understandable. And if your stress loads are that high, you really are going to want to look at what you can do to decompress those stresses. Stress has benefit, but too much of it also has a detriment. So when it comes to those things, we'll do a video later on character development and how to actually change it. But for the intents and purposes of today's video is your thoughts come through your mind. They're here and there. They don't always take root. Sometimes they blow away like little tumbleweeds. Thinking is where something is taking root. where you're putting effort into it to try to understand it better, to see how it fits your life, the structure that you have for your life, and what you're wanting to change, and then making the decision to go from thinking into changing. The character is action. So action can be small. It can be in changing your language. That's an action towards character growth. Changing your physical behavior, doing something different, changing the conversations you have with other people, not just your own, with yourself. Those are all values in character development. So if you want something different, you have to exercise in the uncomfortable areas in order to have something different. There is no professional athlete that has not developed a desire to be uncomfortable, because their only way to become top level athletes is to be better than other people in their areas of being uncomfortable. So that also works in the way of thinking. So when you have that undesirable experience in your own mind, or the way you think, where your fear comes in or other things, that's just like increasing the weight. That's like, changing the rep range so that it actually matches what you want. Change the weight and the reps and the tempo. You start developing more of the body you want versus, or, it changes the body. It's just going to happen. Weight, reps, and tempo, right? That's just a guarantee. What you do as far as the food and things like that is more of what you do with your community. Though your behaviors yourself is the exercise, the food and the rest and all of those things. If you wanted to liken that, you would just look at your groups, your communities, people that know you to be a certain way, and whether or not they're supportive of the change you're trying to make. Now, people also want what's best for you, so long as it's best for them in most instances. And that's pushing you back to what they know, because it's easier to manage that over the things they're trying to manage in their own lives that are busy and need attention. So there's a lot to this, but at least an introduction video on developing yourself, thinking, the thought, thinking, and character development. So hopefully this is beneficial for you guys. Please comment. The tangents and rants will come to a more of a refined product in time, but some keeping with my commitment to doing videos as often as I can. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. Again, this is Chad Everett Broshears, the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. So until next time, keep thinking, keep expanding, and let's keep it going.